Hi, this is Dan from Sanctuary Family Farms. I'm married to Jill, and I'm the father of Joseph and Aaron. My mom had been working hard, waking before dawn, driving the hour to work, spending all day there laboring before coming back to where we lived. So she splurged. She bought a brand new Fender guitar and decided to take lessons. Sometimes I don't have good judgment. As I studied this issue, I found Psalm 119:66. Teach me knowledge and good judgment. Oh, this could be just what I was looking for. What was next? For I trust your commands. Good judgment comes from trusting God. The opposite of trust is control, and control is making all the choices for me and for those around me. Trust is not making everyone's choices, letting them control. Bad judgment comes from me trying to control and make everyone's choices. When you play the parlor game of what's something not many people know about you, I can usually mention the time when I was starting high school that we moved out of the city into the country and lived in tents, driving back into the city to fill up water jugs and take showers, and digging a big hole in the caliche to dump the little porta potty when it got full. The only hot food was over a Coleman, and there was no refrigerator. The special times we drove into town to eat at Pizza Hut, we didn't order enough for a growing hungry teenage boy, but if I wanted to eat anywhere near enough, I had to eat fast, or my dad would eat it all. I often burned my mouth. I learned to control. Because if I just trusted, I would go hungry. And go hungry I did, and when food wasn't there, there was dog food. It wasn't too bad, but trusting my parents for food pretty much went out the window. Poverty is not a sin, but there is a sinful mindset, a bad judgment, that leads to an impoverished existence. And when my mother passed away a couple of weeks ago in a shack with packing blankets for doors and windows, I spent a lot of time thinking about this mindset, this bad judgment. She was not poor. When my father died 8 years earlier, he left her $500,000. And with Social Security and his pension, she was pulling $60,000 a year in. And after his death, she promised to find a Dave Ramsey financial consultant and listen to what they said. That promise was left unfulfilled. And by the end, she lived in a shack with a rotting linoleum floor and no hot running water, still pulling in $5,000 a month. There are many manifestations of bad judgment, but with the recent death of my mother, I've been contemplating the issue of white trash and what I continue to carry forward. And before I go too much further, possibly offending some, allow me to offer my definition of white trash. The label is commonly used to denote poor white people of the South, but to me, it can be more specific and not just covering all Southern white poor people. The definition to me is found in a phrase from a funny sitcom: treat yourself. This is the mantra my mother clung to. Its close relative is, you deserve this. And together, these two philosophies are the cornerstone of the white trash mind. Also, though the term uses the phrase white, the mindset is irrespective of color. Walking the grounds of her shack a couple days after she died, I pondered this mindset, because it's not about her now, it's about my choice. What mindset do I choose to have? Do I want to control, or do I want to trust God, my Abba, my dad? I grew up having learned that I needed to treat myself and that I deserved this fancy new thing or this high-dollar meal. My parents modeled it for me. And after a time in the tents, our family of four graduated to a little two-man trailer, and my mom bought for herself that fancy new guitar and started taking lessons. Being on-fire Christians, she also enrolled at the University of Texas to take a Hebrew class. Meanwhile, many days my sister and I went to school without any lunch money, but that's okay. I learned I had to take matters into my own hands to control. Treat yourself. Which is what I brought into my marriage and into my family. And just like my parents, I could easily clothe my selfishness in spirituality. And several years ago, when I saw my ugly mindset reflection, it was some of the hardest walking I've ever had to do. It wasn't exercised in one bad night. It's a daily choice ever before me. Paul writes in Romans 7, the evil I do not want to do, this I keep doing. Present tense. The writer of most of the New Testament still practices the evil he doesn't want to do. Some days I choose wisely and I trust Him. Some days I choose to keep doing evil. I retain control. Treat yourself. I deserve it. Of course, that's the whole gospel, the good news, that I can actually get what I don't deserve, eternity with God. Separation from Him is what I deserve. This is the core of salvation, what we are saved from. What is the antidote for bad judgment? The treat yourself mindset? Is it to not treat yourself? Well, that's just the other side of the same coin and really doesn't fix anything. That's still control. That's still me making everyone's choices. No, I've learned the only answer, the only fix for this sinful treat yourself mindset is to simply trust His commands and treat yo others. If I'm going to trust His command, Psalm 119:66, then what about the second greatest command, love your neighbor as yourself, Matthew 22:39? That would be treating your others. Treating others is not just giving of things, it's relinquishing control, giving up making all the choices. It's a hard and incredibly vulnerable position to be in. As I look back on my good judgment and bad judgment, it's clear the bad ones were decisions where I decided to take control and treat myself, and the good times were when I decided to trust Him and treat others. It's hard to fathom how simple that is. You'd think I'd get it right more than I do. God wants to feed me. He's not going to scarf all the food and leave me hungry. There are plenty of His commands that back that up. I can let go and trust. God is the giver. Our sin nature is a taker, and I want to be more like Him.
So Dan, I enjoyed that. You and I have a lot of history together, a lot of time together. And, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of similarities between the way you were raised and some of the things that I spent. So I've got a question for everybody out there, because we could spend a lot of time, and we may come back and do this. I'm writing a new part of a book, and it's called Voices of the Past. Now, in your situation, Dan, first of all, I'm going to ask this. Now, you rose from those ashes, as I would say, rose from those circumstances. I mean, so much so that you have written, you produced several movies, you've directed them, you have a very profitable and very fine video company. You do work all over the world, as a matter of fact. You're an accomplished pilot with many ratings on you. So whatever you touch, it almost seems like you're the golden boy. Now, how do you think you did that? Because a lot of people would look back and said, man, I got the shaft. I'm not doing anything else. I deserve better, and I didn't get it, so I'm going to sit here on my rear and just lament.
Oh gosh, see, when you say that, I had never looked at it from that perspective, because even last night at family dinner, you have different families that go through the lines, right? And so you established my family to be about the third family going through. And as we stood there, my wife Jill was busy still preparing something, and people were going through line, and I had this urge to go, oh, but it's all going to be gone. The best choice cuts of meat were going to be picked through, and I had to stop, and I had to say, it's okay. I can trust God. So when you say, golden child, that everything I touch about, I look at that and go, have I not moved forward at all? I still have anxiety when it comes to that kind of thing. But to answer your question, why not just sit back and just be to be a victim? Because I think that's what you're really saying, is that
absolutely.
Early on, especially in our relationship, you mentioned we've been around each other for quite a while. Victim was a dirty word that you taught us. That was not something you wanted to ever be. And I think a long time ago you talked about that a relationship with God is a progressive relationship. It's always moving. It's always, how do you know if somebody is a Christian? Ask them what God's speaking to them at this moment in their life. Because if there's nothing there, then they're not moving forward. So I have to keep moving forward in my relationship with God. And to do that, I can't be a victim. I can't be all these kind of things. So it's more a daily struggle just to say, okay, God, what do you want me to do today?
You know, when you say that, there's some things that come up in my mind, and that is, a lot of people just do not accomplish what you accomplish because they, for whatever reason you want to give. All right, it doesn't matter the reason they give. The fact is, you've done it. You have achieved it. When do you look around and go, God, you've made all this happen out of me. You've made me successful. And what do you term success? What do you determine? Is there an end of the line? Is there a goal? Is there anything there? What do you think success is all about?
Well, the answer to that question, the easy answer is that the way God defines success in the Bible, that good and faithful servant. So good and faithful servant. So success to me is that I did what he said to do. And sometimes I don't remember that on a daily basis. Sometimes I do. And, there was a time in my life where, I'm making the movies and all that kind of stuff. And I spiritualized it and said, look, this movie is reaching, Indonesia, where there's the highest concentration of Muslims. And, this message that, is going forth. And all that was spiritual excuses for me creating and making this stuff out of my own self. And so I still have a lot of, that was a big that was a big cathartic time back 12 years ago, or more than that now, where I guess I saw myself in the mirror and realized, oh, this is ugly. And so it's hard. I don't know, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but I don't look at like you're asking me these questions about what I've accomplished, and I just haven't looked at it that way lately, because it's too easy doing what I do with the public, being out in the public spotlight. It's too easy to get wrapped up in that, and I've done that, and so I'm real scared that I might do that again, and so I try to I try to throttle that as far as, oh, look what I've accomplished. And go to what you were saying, look what God has accomplished through me. And that's a difficult transition. I've had endless talks about narcissism. Mm-hmm. And for the narcissist, that's a very difficult thing. Look what I've accomplished, getting through to the other side of look what God has accomplished in spite of me or through me.
I think sometimes looking back on my life, where I had two sisters like you did, and I had a father who was almost like your mother in reverse. Mm-hmm. He was not there. He was fairly brutal and abusive. And so I pretty well dismissed myself from my own family. Not that they wasn't encouraged, but I dismissed myself as a renegade. Therefore, I had a hard time reconnecting with people because I just was by myself. I had my dogs. I played with them. I was isolate. I didn't want anybody else. I didn't care about anybody else. I learned to adapt to being, whatever it takes to learn to survive in the public and be a personable person. But as far as on the inside, it was like, okay, I'm struggling myself. How can I help other people? So when we look at our past like that, yours, you didn't have a great deal of relationship with your family, your mother and father. So it would be almost like the thing we ignore the most sometimes is the very thing that we think, okay, I survived it, everybody should survive it. It's like, I think, I learned to live isolate life. My family can live isolate. They don't need me there. They don't want me there. And yet I know that is so core to my inner healing, to my child that's inside of me, has got to be brought back up, has got to be healed. And the only way to do that is to return and restore the relationships that I never had. And it's difficult because I've learned to be isolate and alone and an individual. And I know sometimes you talk about control, because my control is, okay, I take care of you, I tell you what to do, but don't get inside. Don't get too close. Do you ever struggle with that?
Well, I think for me, yeah, I a couple of different things you were talking about were striking a chord. For me, it wasn't about relationship with family. It was how quick can I get to school.
Mm-hmm.
That was my escape, and also music. Music was my escape, and I would just, and it may sound kind of strange, but I remember in the tents and out there, music became my best friend, and it's,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's kind of what you're talking about, because it certainly wasn't a person. Then when I did see, like, I did have a best friend from school, and he was a couple years older than me and had his own car. So, but during the summer when I'd hear that car coming, it was like the best thing I've ever heard. And I would not sleep the night before school because I was so excited to get away from this environment and into that. And as you're talking, so I don't know, were those relationships were they something that could really satisfy that appetite for relationships, or was it just a false one? I don't know. I'd have to really chew on that, and which then carries forward to today. I certainly have a little bit of an imposter syndrome, with letting people in because they might find out that, I'm not all that. Or
Did
this.
you eat dog food?
Yeah, I ate dog food.
Incidentally, I tried dog food too, and some brands are a lot better than others. But
The kibble is the best stuff, and that's what we'd have. Don't eat the wet stuff. Stay away from that. But there were times that, anyway.
Great. You know what? We'll take this up again, Dan, but I really appreciate the blog. I really appreciate the openness, and I really appreciate the journey you've been on, and as we're all on. So I just encourage you to keep going and keep writing, because you're very prolific at writing and very good at that. So thanks for the opportunity today.
You're very welcome.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hey y'all, thanks for joining us for Around the Supper Table. At Sanctuary Family Farms, we want to be real. Whether that's through our blogs, daily verses, or even Nana's recipes, we want to share the messages that God has laid on each of our hearts. If you liked what you heard today or want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook and YouTube at Sanctuary Family Farms, or our website at www.sanctuaryfamilyfarms.com, where we share our recipes and blogs and sell farm fresh beef and pork. We can't wait for you to join us again for next week's episode.